everyone, it's Katie from Paradise Falls family. In this video I'll be talking through our city break to Warsaw in January 2024 to enjoy the Christmas markets. If we're being honest, Warsaw was never really high up on our list of must visits, but we had a lovely break and would really recommend it for a winter trip. As usual, I'll talk through what we did and what went into our planning with some tips along the way. Our trip came in the first week of January, when we tend to find there's always decent deals before the kids go back to school. We always try to make the most of this and get away if we can, and this year we wanted somewhere either with snow or with Christmas markets to get our last fix of the festivities. We didn't have a massive budget for this trip, so the usual snowy destinations in Europe, things like ski resorts as well as Lapland and northern Scandinavia, weren't really an option this time around. So we turned our attention to a short city break. We considered Oslo, Helsinki, Stockholm, Vienna and many others, but given that snow wasn't guaranteed, we opted for somewhere with Christmas markets still running. That way, even if the weather wasn't what we'd hoped for, we'd still have some Christmassy bits that we could enjoy. So focusing on the Christmas markets, there weren't too many cities with them still running in January. We narrowed it down to Tallinn, Prague and Warsaw. Tallinn was our first choice as it's supposed to be beautiful and a real fairy tale city, but the flight options weren't great, so we decided to leave this for another time. It then came down to a 50-50 choice between Prague and Warsaw. We opted for Warsaw just because we'd found a great hotel deal and the flights were slightly better times, but we'd love to visit Prague another time. After the problems we experienced on our Brussels trip last year, you can find the vlog in the same playlist as this one. We were careful to pick our flights a little bit more carefully this time. We were able to get return flights from Leeds to Warsaw Magdalene with Ryanair for £545 for the four of us, including seat reservations and one suitcase. We thought this was a really decent price for the school holidays, and a lot of other cities we looked at had similar pricing for this week, so it's a really good time to get away with a budget trip. For accommodation, we'd found the InterContinental Warsaw for a total of £530 for 3 nights. This was for a King Junior suite and worked out at around £175 per night, which is brilliant for a hotel of this quality. We're members of the IHG Ambassador Club and love their selection of hotels and their reward scheme, so we do try and use IHG if we possibly can, and in particular the InterContinental where our budget allows. So we spotted this deal, we snapped it up and we were on our way. As I mentioned, our stay was for 3 nights, flying out on the 2nd of January and back on the 5th. We parked up at Leeds Airport for £56 in their Mid-State 2 car park, within walking distance of the terminal, and enjoyed a meal in the terminal before a smooth flight out to Warsaw. Magdalene isn't the main airport in Warsaw and is mainly served by budget airlines, so it's a way out of the city. But we landed at 7:15 p.m, so it was still open and really busy when we arrived. Again, after our problems we experienced on the Brussels trip with our reserved transfers, we decided just to get our own taxi into the city. We'd read beforehand that there was a fixed rate coming into the city, but this has now been removed, so unfortunately it was a little bit more than we were expecting and cost around £60. Nevertheless, the driver was lovely, the journey smooth, and we arrived at the InterContinental driving through the beautiful city all lit up for Christmas. Being part of the IHG Ambassador Club, we always get a slight room upgrade, in this case to a higher floor room. And we had an amazing room overlooking the Palace of Culture and Science. The room was massive, with a sofa bed, another fold-out bed so the kids had their own beds, which is always great, loads of floor space, a seating area and a brilliant bathroom with a walk-in shower. We were also fortunate enough to get a welcome gift, which was really lovely. The hotel itself looked brilliant. It's in a really striking tower and it was decorated for Christmas, so we were really pleased with our choice here. By now, time was getting on. We were tired but hungry, so we popped down the street to the Zlote Tarasy Mall to grab some dinner in the food court. Not the most exciting, but it did the trick when we were tired and it was late. The food court here is on the top floor and has loads of great options, so it was really handy with the kids and with everyone wanting something different. After a good night's sleep, we were ready for the first of our 2 full days exploring the city. We started with breakfast in the hotel. This was buffet style and was great quality and had a wonderful selection, and we had a really good meal. But it was fairly pricey for a family of 4, so we decided not to try this again as we just didn't see the value for us personally. Ready for the day, we jumped in an Uber to take us out to the Warsaw Rising Museum. We usually flip between Ubers and public transport when we're out exploring cities, depending on the situation. Warsaw has a decent public transport system, but the metro only has 2 different lines, neither of which were particularly close to our hotel. And we only had a few journeys to make, so we opted for Ubers rather than working out the trams and buses on this occasion. With travel being pretty cheap, this didn't work out very expensive, and it was only around £5 to take us out to the museum. There are loads of really good museums in Warsaw, which I'll talk about more later, but we didn't want this trip to be too heavy on sightseeing and museums. Our plan was to see a little bit of the city, enjoy the Christmas festivities and relax. We decided to pick just one museum while we were here, and we went for the Warsaw Uprising Museum, which is billed as one of the top things to do in the city. And it cost around £20 for the 4 of us, so it was really reasonably priced too. Warsaw suffered really badly during World War II, with much of the city being destroyed and a significant proportion of the population was killed. There was also the ghettos, imposed on the Jewish population by the Nazis, and this museum focuses on this and the uprising in 1945. It's a fascinating look at the city and the shocking events that occurred, with some great exhibits, most of which are also translated into English. We'd really recommend it to get a feel for the history of the city. It also explains how much of the city was destroyed but then rebuilt following the war. So most of the old town was actually rebuilt and it's not the original. The kids found some bits interesting, but we were conscious to move through the museum quickly and spent about an hour here before moving on. Over the road is the Warsaw Spire, one of the tallest buildings in the city, and the business district. We wandered through here on the way across to the Footbridge of Memory, which is nearby. This commemorates the old footbridge connecting the 2 parts of the old ghetto. The memorial consists of poles marking the location of the old bridge, with peepholes showing photos of the old bridge as it was. There are then strips along the ground throughout the city to mark the border of the ghetto, as well as a few pieces of the old wall dotted around the city, one of which we spotted the following evening not far from our hotel. Having spent the morning learning about the history of the city, we wanted to liven it up a bit for the kids, so we jumped back in a cheap Uber and headed back to the Palace of Culture and Science to do some shopping in the surrounding square and for a quick McDonald's lunch. When we're away, we tend to eat at places that we know to make it as easy as possible with the kids. But we do try and mix this up as well and sample some local food where we can. Refreshed, we headed on up the observation deck of the Palace of Culture and Science to take in the views of the city. This is a massive and iconic building, one of the main sites in the city, containing theatres, a cinema, bars and cafes. It's really easy to get tickets and head on up for just £15 for the 4 of us. It was quiet at the top, so we spent some time taking in the views and then headed down for some ice skating in the square below. The rink had been closed due to weather and rain, but had just reopened and we pretty much had the whole ice rink to ourselves. It wasn't the best setting, to be honest. It was fairly dreary in the rain with no one around, but the kids still had loads of fun nonetheless. After a bit more shopping over the road at the Zlote Tarasy Mall, we again hopped in another Uber to the Old Town to spend some of the evening down there. The Christmas markets in Warsaw are pretty small, mainly just a row of stalls along the walled Barbican just opposite the Royal Castle. However, they have all the usual treats, food and drink and souvenirs, and we had lots of fun exploring these, having some pancakes, chimney cakes and some glühwein for Greg and I. There are also some fun Christmas light installations in and around the square by the Royal Castle, and these look gorgeous at night, so it had a really nice festive atmosphere. We thought about staying down here to get some dinner, but we decided to head back to the hotel area where we ate at the nearby Hard Rock Cafe, a family favourite, before getting some rest. The next day we had a leisurely morning, deciding on a quick snacky breakfast in the room, having picked up some bits from a shop the previous night, before heading up to the pool for a swim. The pool and gym at the hotel sit on the top floors, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Palace of Culture and Science and the rest of the city. It makes for an amazing place to take a swim and to relax in the hot tub, and we all had a brilliant time. This is one of the many perks of staying at the InterContinental Warsaw, and we loved this aspect of the hotel. Lunch was again in the food court at the mall down the street, keeping it really simple when we're travelling with the kids. We did have another reason for visiting the mall this time though. We wanted to try out E Wedel, a cafe specialising in hot chocolate and chocolatey treats, and this place was amazing. There was so much we wanted to try on the menu, and we enjoyed some lovely treats. There are a few of these cafes across the city, so if you're here, we'd really recommend trying them and enjoying some of the sweet treats on offer. Having had a fairly chilled day so far, we spent the rest of the afternoon doing a bit of sightseeing. We caught an Uber down to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, narrowly missing the changing of the guard. Walking through the Saxon Gardens, across to the Krasinski Palace and the spectacular Warsaw Uprising Monument, which was really impressive. From here, the Christmas lights started as we headed further into the old town, wandering the quaint cobbled streets filled with little cafes and souvenir shops, all lit up beautifully. We went as far as the Marie Curie Monument. This sits on top of a flight of stairs down to a park below, which contains a massive fountain which puts on a light show each night. We were able to catch some of this before moving on, working our way to Old Town Square, enjoying the Christmas lights that were lit up along the way. On the way, we came across a few Christmas carousels that you have to turn yourselves, or rather Greg and several other dads did, as the kids sit and enjoy the ride. The main square, although not the biggest, was absolutely beautiful, certainly rivaling anywhere we saw in Bruges the previous Christmas. It was lit up across the square and had a brilliant ice rink in the middle surrounding the Syrenka statue, which is the symbol of the city. The skating only cost a few pounds for all of us, compared to several times this the previous day at the Palace of Culture and Science. It was a brilliant setting and a lovely place to ice skate. There were also a couple of stalls around the square selling snacks, treats and glühwein, and it felt really festive and lovely. After some fun here, it was time for dinner, and this time we ventured out and tried something a bit more local. We found a tiny restaurant on the square with just a little back room, and we all tried pierogies. We thought these were delicious. The kids were a bit less keen, but they gave it a try anyway, which was nice. It was a lovely evening, and afterwards we carried on up to the Royal Castle, spending some more time at the markets before moving on up the Royal Way, which leads from the Royal Castle up to the Presidential Palace and beyond. We just did the first stretch before turning right and walking back up to the Palace of Culture and Science and the hotel. However, just this section let us take in the Presidential Palace and the monuments to Copernicus and Chopin. There are lots of benches located around the city which act as monuments to Chopin and play some of his music, so it was really cool to see one of these. The route we took also had a lot of Christmas lights as well, with the whole route lit up with interactive light installations that we all really enjoyed, particularly the kids. Although the Christmas markets are relatively small, we definitely got our festive fill, with the lights making the city look beautiful, along with the skating rinks, and it's definitely worth keeping this in mind for a beautiful Christmas break. Back at the hotel, it was time to pack and chill out, ready for our journey home the next day. We pre-booked a taxi through the hotel, which cost around £70, a little bit more, but it was in one of their luxury cars as a treat, and we left at 8:30 the next morning for our flight at 1. Magdalene Airport is pretty small, but there were a couple of places to eat and a few small shops, and we had a lovely flight home on Buzz Airlines, which was a new one for us, but everything went really smoothly. So that was an overview of our Christmas break to Warsaw. As I mentioned, we didn't want to go hard on the sightseeing, with it just being a relaxed Christmassy break. So there is lots to see and do in the city that we didn't get to. To start with, there are loads of museums you can take in, most notably the Chopin Museum, the Polin Museum, the Marie Curie Museum, the Neon Museum, the Science Centre, which only just missed the cut for us, and the Polish Vodka Museum, for those perhaps not with kids. For those of you into your classical music, there are live performances of Chopin's music at various venues in the city as well. Then in nicer weather, there's Leszensky Park and the Vistulin Boulevards, a promenade down by the river, and Wilanow Palace and Park a little further out. So there's absolutely loads to do, certainly enough to warrant a city break, and particularly at Christmas. Everybody was really friendly and it was a lovely place to visit. So hopefully that gives a pretty good overview of the city and everything you can enjoy with your break. As I mentioned, Warsaw wasn't that high on our list, but we were pleasantly surprised and would really recommend spending a few days here. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to our channel, as we've got loads more vlogs coming this year. In the meantime, if you've got any questions or any other tips, please just let us know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching.